Hey guys, and welcome to the next episode of the D&Y Podcast. D&Y Podcast, sorry,
Yeah,
with Yassin on the other side and myself, Dimitri here. Thank you much for joining in, and thank you so much, Yassin, for being
thanks, man.
here. How are you this week, man? Or this month, I should say.
Man, this month was crazy. I had a lot of stuff going on, bit of health issues, um, taken care of, almost died in a car accident. But um, but through it all, I've been I've been going doing well business-wise, and I was pretty happy to see that my mindset um was pretty positive despite the storms, that went through. Um, and if you want, I could even share a wisdom nugget with you that I learned this week, or just in general this month. I was reading this book for those of you that don't know, I'm a big WWE fan of a WWE wrestler and his story. And one thing he brought up is how his mom had this disease where she couldn't balance herself. And despite this, she always had to touch the wall to to cook food for them and to give them stuff. And despite this, she took care of both her kids. She would go around, walk, and give them food, come back, and she was always such a positive person. And when people would ask her, "How are you like this?" she would say, "Well, could have always been worse. There's somewhere else where out there where it could have been worse." And that's the lesson I went through this week, and I kept reminding myself of. And my biggest takeaway from the book is just, so far, I haven't finished it yet, is just it could have always been worse. No matter how hard it got for you right now, whether it's health, whether it's family, business, it could have always been much worse. And every one of us has got something at least to be grateful for. That's what I'll say. It's the biggest lesson for me.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you for your wisdom nugget.
Thank
Yassine actually came up with the name of Wisdom Nugget just as we were discussing the topic of the podcast. I was like, Yassine, it would be great if at the start of every podcast we'd find out a way to give a piece of wisdom or a piece of knowledge that we learned
Yeah,
this month. And Yassine came up with the name as lyric as he is. He said, "Let's just call it Wisdom Nugget or something." And I thought it was great. So we're gonna call it Wisdom Nugget from
yeah,
now on. And I can continue with mine. But before I continue with mine, I want to have a small comment on what you said
mhm,
because I think it's a wonderful way of living. If you think of, hey, it could be worse. I mean, we're both so gifted. We live in one of the greatest countries you can basically live in and you can basically grow in. It's
yeah,
as free as a country can get, as democratic as a country can get, and the opportunities are massive. Capital is here, money is here. I mean,
hmm,
we're very gifted. But even you in your situation, if you're in a worse situation than us because you didn't grow up in, you weren't as gifted as we are with the country you live in, there's still people, and if you're 100% healthy, some people don't have two legs, some people don't have two arms, and some people, sadly, they don't live anymore, and some people die quite early of things. So these are definitely things to be grateful for. And instead of always complaining, which is what we humans like to do, we like to complain about anything and everything. But at the end of the day, you have to appreciate the situation you are currently in.
yeah. Could I add something real quick that I've
Sure.
been doing just to be more grateful throughout the day in general? One thing I've done is that I've put these like small reminders, like even on my phone, where I ask myself like, what are three things you're grateful for? Um, because I just wanted to get in the habit more in general. And it actually helps because when I go to my room, there's like a poster saying this. When I look at my computer, there's even one attached, small one. So it's like a good way of, oh, don't, it's terrible today. There's some terrible things that happen, but there's always something you can remember remember to be grateful for. So yeah.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, so to my wisdom nugget, as we call it, this week, or no, last week, sorry, I experimented a bit with ChatGPT and having ChatGPT be my tutor. And it is incredible how great ChatGPT is. And you don't even have to spend 10 minutes explaining your whole situation to him, because we as humans, we're all lazy and we prefer to talk rather than type everything out on a computer. And ChatGPT has the function of talking with him. I don't know if it's only with ChatGPT Plus or if it's with every version of ChatGPT, even the free one. I don't know if you know
I
that.
think with everyone you have it to an extent, but with the plus you get more,
Yeah,
you know?
because I have the Plus. I'm not sure if you can, but as Yassin said, take the ChatGPT app. It even works on the web, but I prefer just the app. You have your phone and you can just talk with ChatGPT and explain your whole situation, the business you're trying to build, the goals you're trying to achieve, the lifestyle you want to have, all of those things.
Hmm.
And you can ask ChatGPT to help you in certain things. One of my goals is to have a lot more knowledge in a lot more different areas in life, quite random areas, I must say, but I'm just nerdy in those situations, and I like to understand more about certain things. Might that be computers or any mechanical technical thing or any also business stuff. So I give ChatGPT a whole list of things I want to learn, and ChatGPT gives me every morning when I'm drinking my coffee, I take 5 minutes and make sure to go through with ChatGPT one of those topics in a very small section of that
Mm.
specific topic. So if I want to learn more about marketing or how to sell a product, ChatGPT will tell me, for example, how you can price things so it impacts how much people buy. Or for example, McDonald's does this when you have three products, and depending on how you price the middle one, it decides which one the person buys. Some of those things, and it takes 5 minutes every morning. That's the way I've set it up, but you can do so much with ChatGPT. One thing to be careful about, maybe you guys have a way to get around this, maybe Yassin, you have a way to get around this. But what I found is ChatGPT doesn't like to speak against you or say you're wrong. Mostly ChatGPT always says, yes, you're right, even if you say something that is wrong.
Mm. I
And
have a way like
ChatGPT always likes to say you're doing great or that was great, although you didn't. One time I was speaking with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT thought I ended what I said, but I said like 3 words, and then ChatGPT said, "Oh, that's a great response," and I was like, "What are you talking about?" Didn't even say anything. So yeah, be careful with that. I don't know if you have a way to get around this, Yassine.
Yeah, it's not an easy way, but it took time for me to get around it. I basically had to work a lot with ChatGPT for him to understand the tone I like, and to know me. And so I had a few conversations, like you said, I would journal a lot with ChatGPT, talking, tell him a lot of things, and then over time, I developed with one of the chats a history. And then what I ended up doing is I took that ChatGPT because I would tell him, okay, I don't like the way you're speaking, you're being too kind,
Yeah,
or here you're not being harsh. Be direct. I don't want you to just be the type of guy that tells me what I want to hear. I want you to be the guy that challenges me and gets me to see another point of view.
yeah.
And over time,
Give me a
it
second,
started.
man. Give me a
Yeah, no
second. Sorry.
worries. How you know it's authentic, guys.
Oui. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a?
Forget to subscribe. So far, I know I haven't gotten into the juice, but don't forget to subscribe.
I'm back.
Yeah,
I'm sorry
welcome
about
back.
that.
No,
Continue, man.
So I was saying, like, I've been telling it, yeah, don't use that tone with me, you know. And after a while, it got the hang of it. And then what I did, instead of, having to restart every time from zero with the chat, because after a while, I think you'll notice this, you will run out of space in one chat. Even if you have the plus version, they'll be like, oh, you've reached the maximum capacity. And so instead of having to restart from ground zero, I basically tell this chat GPT, tell me what are the things you've learned about me that you didn't know before we met, that you wish I had told you more about, things you've discovered over time. Tell me what are my strengths, my weaknesses, things we've agreed upon, like deals we've made, things I need to improve, and what's the best tone and way to speak to me. Because I tell it I'm gonna prompt another chat GPT, and then I take that stuff and I put it in another chat GPT. So now that other chat GPT, instead of starting from zero, instead of starting with the friendly tone of "Hey, it's okay," it starts with a more with a tone that fits me more in my situation. And every time the chat reaches maximum capacity, I do that, and I'm like, but I add something else. This is for you and for the viewers who would like to do this. I'm like, first time I gave you a prompt from a chat GPT before you. What are some things you wish he had told you that he didn't, that you discovered about me over time, or that he didn't emphasize enough that you discovered about me over time? And what are evolutions that took place compared to before when you first met me and now? And then I take that and I put it in the next chat. So it becomes something that always completes each other every time, you know? That's how I do it.
It's a good one. That's a good one. With the chat thing, there's a way, if you have the plus version, you can create your own GPT. And by creating your own GPT, you can give that GPT all the information, all the custom things. You can even give him documents and all of that, give him a purpose, whatever he is. And then when you start a new chat, you can always choose which of the GPTs you'd like to use. For instance, you can use the standard one, or you can use the one you just created, or you can create multiple GPTs, and they'll act differently based on what information you give them when you start. So you don't have to do what you said every time you start with a new GPT or with a new chat. You can just configure your own GPT. Might as well try that. And entering your prompt that you did, entering that into that GPT, and then it remembers all of the things, and it doesn't really matter. Yeah, the chat doesn't really matter. Then you could also just create a new chat every time. That's something I've used with clients, for example. When you have a certain client and then he has certain rules and certain things that are relevant to that specific client, where the responses have to be in a certain way. So I've created GPTs for them, or for other purposes in school as well. That can be very, very helpful.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. I have the plus, but I completely forgot about this configuration thing over time.
Yeah, it's crazy what ChatGPT can do. Yeah, I can't tell it enough that it's crazy. But yeah, let's get to our topic, because we spent the first 13 minutes talking about that, but it was very, very interesting, I must say.
Yeah.
But our topic, as you saw in the title, is why the hustle culture is a scam, or what's scammy about it. And I'll let you, Yassin, take the first instance of this. How have you experienced the hustle culture? Have you been a practitioner of the hustle culture, and what's your opinion on it now?
Yeah, I have been a big practicer of the hustle culture, especially. Sorry. Sorry. I don't know why someone called me mid podcast, but
we seem like a really, really busy man. we aren't that busy, I must say, but yeah, it's not that someone knocks on my door even every day and even every week, but it happened directly when we're doing the podcast. So I'm sorry about that. But yeah, Yassin, go ahead.
Um, I was gonna say the thing with hustle culture, I was really into it, especially when I had the real world. I was really into the real world because the philosophy that I got or took from it was every minute should be spent working. Family only get maximum an hour, you know, and then every other aspect of life, sure, you can do it, but it gets an hour. You know, it wasn't about it, it seemed like efficiency was not a big thing. And so to me it was just I could take 4 or 5 hours writing one email, which is insane. But I've over time I've realized that that's not smart. And so not just the part that they tell you work hard and work for long hours. I agree some days you might have to work longer than others, obviously. But I think in business your goal should always be how can I be the most efficient? How can I get my work done in the most efficient way? Because as much as this, people tend to forget this. Entrepreneurs, at the end of the day, they do this because they want freedom. And so if you're trapped all the time in the business, are you really free or are you just working a 9 to 5 but for yourself instead of someone else? You know? That's what I've come to realize. I, and I'm not perfect at it. I'd be a liar if I said I'm perfect at it, but I'm starting to try and get back into that rhythm where I could win religiously, win physically, and win business wise, while also having some time for friends and family.
Hmm. I think sustainability is also a really important word
Mm,
with the hustle culture, because yeah, you can, and there's also different, I don't know if you've heard of monk mode, or I think 75
mm,
hard is also one of those things where you're in that state for a shorter period of time, which might be a lot, or would make a lot more sense rather than just
forever.
hustling through, because at the end of the day it's not going to be sustainable, or that's what
Mm,
I've experienced. But making sure you work every day on it, and making sure you're consistent with it, and also making sure that you're efficient, as Yassin said, because that's going to be the key. If you try and work 16 hours a day or even more, you'll lose it on efficiency after some point, because you'll lose the focus, and make taking a break to just have your ideas sorted out, and giving your brain some time to breathe, in my
so,
opinion, is always necessary. And
yeah.
when I go on walks, and I try to go on walks as often as I can, if I can, every single day, those are so, even if it's only for 15 or 20 minutes, for not very long, I go work for 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 as I said, 10-15 minutes, and then that helps me free up my brain. It's crazy. And it's also crazy what you realize in those times, because if you're just focused on your screen 24/7, and that's the only thing you do, there's things you won't realize that are dumb.
Yeah.
For instance, last week I was working on a project, working on optimizing the process of the specific service we do for our client. And when I went on the walk, I was like, what am I doing? I'm overcomplicating it. I'm putting in a step that doesn't even make sense to put in, and I'm making too much work into that process, and I should just make it easier in less time. Yes, I spent way too much time last week working on that specific task, and at the end of the day, I wasted that time. But then I realized it because I try to go on walks and have time to think freely. Because if you're on your phone, on your computer, on your phone, then this and then that. And the same thing as Yassine said with spending time with friends and family, it's important. It's important to have, especially we men are this way, of having good brothers around us, where we can have meaningful conversations, and we can have people to just also laugh with, and have a good time, and sometimes also talk shit, and all of those things. These are real important things in life. Sometimes to
Yeah.
just sit with your boys and talk shit, or also have meaningful conversations as we're having right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is very, very important. Because on the other hand, if you're alone trying to hustle through it, yes, it's lonely and it's still lonely. You're still gonna be sitting a lot alone in front of the computer, but or whatever you're trying to do, alone in the business you're trying to run. But finding a balance still is a good one. Don't expect to be working 8 hours a day and clocking at 9 and clock out at 5, and you don't work on the weekends, because I mean that's not how it works for me. And I
Yeah.
still work on the weekends. I still sometimes work in the evenings, but I also try to have some time where I just switch off and do something else.
Yeah. And I think, bro, one thing you said about the walks and the friends, it's important because, look, if you always are on the screen, always in your room, you don't go and live life. And I'll tell you, sometimes, I used to think, oh, trips, I hate those damn trips we do with family because they're distractions, we're not working. But two things that I've realized. Sometimes I learn something that benefits me somehow, or I see something that somehow benefits me in my copy or in my brain becoming creative. And sometimes it just, your mind, when it's sometimes always under pressure, it can't release creativity and get these ridiculous ideas because it's like we have to be realistic. We don't have time. But when you're in those situations where you're a bit more chill, you're with friends, it allows you to expand your mind, to let the ridiculous ideas come out because, why not? You're in a ridiculous mood anyway. And sometimes one of those ideas might be smart, you know? But the other thing is when you talk with people, even if they're not in business, you can always get something, learn something, uh, recognize something. And so that can be useful for you in some shape or form. But about that point, I wanted to mention also about going on walks and things. Like when you expose yourself to different things, you're doing construction right now, right? You said you're into cars, and I think you told me once you did those things yourself. You tried to fix it and learn how to do it yourself. Right now, in the moment, someone who's looking at it from behind might be like, "Why is he doing these things? They're so useless. How are they going to benefit him?" But in the future, maybe, there's an opportunity that comes and all this knowledge ends up working somehow, some way together, you know? So the more things you get exposed to, the more life, the more world, the more people, I think the more you get to become smarter in here, Get more ideas, get more out of the box thinking.
Yeah, if you try and analyze certain situations in your life, you can find a way to learn something from it. As you said, there's always something to learn, and you never know how you can use it. As you said, I love cars, and I love to understand how cars work and how this engine works and how you can fix this. And I did things myself on my car, and I fucked up with things that, yeah, then I had to fix it and spend a lot more time on it. But I've learned things, and in my opinion, as I said, my goal is to have a bunch of knowledge and to know a bunch of things. And cars is something that I find really interesting, and it's almost gotten into a hobby. Not too much, but I always try to spend time and figuring out things and learning about those things. I find that interesting. And what you mentioned of construction, I work 3 days, but mostly 2 days on the construction site on a construction site at the moment, where I help a friend to renovate a house. And again, it's something that's totally different from what I've done up until now. I
Mm.
did an apprenticeship, was sat in an office every single day, and that's all I did. That's all I saw. And if you're on a construction site, it's a totally different environment. You meet people that they're all also part of society, but you don't encounter them as much when you work in an office. And they also have worldviews and other ways they see how society works. And look, houses have to be built, houses have to be renovated, And if you press on the light switch, there's things that work then, and it's not only it's not only the white cap you see, it's also a lot of things behind it, as well as how to install a bunch of things. And we're so gifted in the Western world now that we don't know how the things work. Or you look at water coming out of the wall, and that's it. You have the light switch; it just works. But it's interesting to understand how it works, and that knowledge, you never know when it can help you. Sometime you might in the future buy a house or buy a rental unit because you want to rent it out to some people and have it as cash flow, you know. And that might be very, very helpful when you buy those things, to understand how they work, to see what's the condition of those things, because if you have no idea, you might make a mistake there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my point of view on it. That's why the business is not taking up 100% of my time at the moment, but I'm fine with it, and I know the reasons behind it, and they make sense to me.
Yeah, maybe we could tell people though how we're able to do this. Like me, you even more than me. But I'll also, before we go into this, I want to say something about a point you said earlier, highlight it kind of. What Dimitri said about certain periods where you might be working a bit harder than others, that's also true. Like there's some periods where you are going to be having maybe a week where there's a bit of work. But what we're saying is more like he said, you can't keep doing this forever, you know? You can't keep doing this you'll eventually lose, because I think one of my friends put it best. He was like, every day we get a certain amount of brain points, and those brain points go into different tasks, different things, right? And so over time, you need some time to rest, especially if you've been using a lot of that brain power, you know?
Yeah, you're right about that. You have to find a routine and a way to operate that works for you. Because
Mm,
one day you'll have a family, one day you'll have to spend time with them as well. Or I hope you also want to spend time with them
yeah.
and have time to spend with your kids. And sure, you'll have to maybe work a bit harder now, but again, if you have the mindset, I'm gonna work 8 hours and it's finished, you have to be flexible. And sometimes there's be evenings where you can't go out with your friends, and you'll have to finish a project or a task or something. That's true. It's it's not the only freedom. There's also the work that comes with it, and
Yeah.
that's part of it.
Yeah. Well, why don't you tell us a bit, Dimitri, maybe like how you've been able to find time management wise a way to make all of this work together, and then I'll jump in.
It's a good question. I think having a calendar with everything in it is just the key. I couldn't live without it. And when you forget to put things in your calendar, like I did today with this podcast recording, it wasn't in my calendar today at 11, so I missed it. And just as I was taking a coffee, yeah, about 1.5 hours ago, I was like, we had a meeting with Yassin about the podcast recording. Either it was today or Tuesday, I don't remember. So I went into your chat and I saw, oh, it was this morning at 11. And yeah, I simply didn't put it in my calendar. And look, I fuck up sometimes, it's true. Again, I'm not perfect, as Yassin already said. He's not perfect too. But to put things into the calendar is such a key thing, because otherwise you'll just forget, or that's at least how it works with me. If I don't put things in there, I'm gonna forget them. If I have to edit a video, then it has to be in my calendar, and I try to plan out as much as I can on it. And then if somebody tells me, hey, are you free, then I can tell them if I'm free or not, because I
Hmm.
know.
Yeah, that's a good one, really. Um, I could add one too. I think the calendar one is super powerful. I also need to get better at this one. I fuck up sometimes. Um, but I also think part of the calendar, or something that is as important as the calendar, is being consistent in your wake up time and maybe your sleep time. I would recommend it, but I know it's not always possible. But in your wake up time, because that allows you to have a structure for your day. And that's good, because when you don't have a structure, it's chaos, you know? And the other thing that also helps a lot is, you know, telling yourself, I don't have all day to work on this task. You know, I have to try my best to get it done by X amount of hours, you know? And you really take that seriously. I would even sometimes go as far as making a commitment with a friend afterwards to make it real. You know, being like, I'm gonna go out with you at this time. So to make myself use the fast urgency part of my brain, you know? So that's another thing that helps. And the other thing is deep work, or the first few hours of deep focus. And during these times, it's very good to have like again, which is why, you know, you have to have a consistent wake up time, because you can set up your tools like your phone and stuff to block things at that time, so you can just focus on the task at hand, you know? And what I struggle with is, when I'm not consistent, I then don't know how to schedule those things, and it's kind of a mess. So that's why I would recommend also the wake up time. Being consistent is pretty important to the best you can, you know?
That's true. And something I can add to that as well is, when you have certain tasks and certain projects, I should say, that you have to finish in that day, try to do them first thing in the morning, because it's such a relief if you do something first thing in the morning and then it's done. Because otherwise, if you have to hustle it, and I've done that many times, way too many times, when, you know, I have to finish something at 6 p.m. and then I get to it in the afternoon and the energy is already less than it was in the morning, and then you're trying to stress it, and the quality at the end of the day is going to go down with it. So try and use the first hours you have in the day, because those ones are the most productive. At least that's how it works for me. And then, as you said, with the consistent wake up time, and as you said, with the scheduling friends, find a way to make it work for you. Maybe that method might not work for you because for whatever reason, but with Yassin it works. Find a way to make sure to schedule the things, and so you can get the things done. You can figure it out and test and try and fail and see how it can maybe work or maybe not work. But find a way to balance all of that. And I found that scheduling things in worked best, because otherwise I forget things. My brain isn't as good at remembering everything I have to do. If I don't write it down or put it somewhere, I'm gonna forget it.
I want to ask you something about that, Dimitri, the scheduling part. Because I know some people, they literally schedule everything in their day. Like, even like, okay, I'm gonna go to the bathroom at this time and stuff like that.
Crazy. I don't do that.
And some people, you know, sometimes they have a schedule, but life gets in the way, and then they feel like a failure, or they don't know what to do because this wasn't in the schedule. So now they're panicking. What do I do? What can I save? And I want to ask you, like, how do you deal with this? How do you manage to make your schedule routine and strict, but also flexible at the same time?
Look, if you think something's gonna take 2 hours, schedule it as 3 hours, because it's always gonna. We're particularly bad. People or we humans are particularly bad at trying to figure out how long something takes. So always try and plan in more time for it than you think it's gonna take. And then sometimes it's not going to go exactly as scheduled. Sometimes something's gonna still take longer than that, and sometimes something's gonna come in the way, and you'll have to do that right now because of whatever reason something's unplanned. It's gonna come in, but sometimes you have to adapt, and then it's gonna happen that you'll have to work longer in the evening, and then it fucks up your bedtime, It's going to happen, but as we're still young, we can adapt to that. And even if we get 4 or 5 hours of sleep instead of 6 or 7, it's still fine. But you have to be flexible. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I think it's also another thing with it is also like try to save as much as you can, you know? If you can't, if let's say you had this plan where you had these five priorities and a, something came and now you can only get three of them done, pick the three that are the most important. And as much as it's gonna hurt your ego and you're gonna feel like a failure, but if you really can't do it, you know, then do it for the next day. And don't take it as a failure because when it's out of your control, you couldn't do much about it.
Look, my opinion on it there
Mm-hmm.
is it's always, most of the things are in your control. There's always
Mm-hmm.
things you can do. If something happens to you, there's always, not always, but most of the time, there's something you can do about it. There's something you could have done differently to prevent this from happening. And if in your day something unexpected happens and you have to do this or that differently,
Yeah.
try and think, is there a way I could have done that? I could have,
Mm.
or I could have prevented that thing from happening or that thing from coming in the way. Could have, maybe I could have done what I wanted to do in that day earlier. So at 5 p.m., if my friend called and had an emergency, I would have already done everything before that. There's
Yeah.
always things you can try and find out. Still take self accountability for it, because if you think your life is controlled by everything else, I mean,
Yeah.
try and take the accountability for what happens and try and find a
Yeah.
way to make it better, because it's the only way you're going to improve. If you take the accountability and say, I fucked up, I have to do it differently, but then move on. Don't pick on it for 7 days and it happened. You
Yeah.
cannot change the past, but you can change in the future how you react to it and how you deal
Yeah.
with the things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a mix of both. It's like, as you said, always try to focus though, oh my God, on what you can control or could have done better. And and yeah, if there's really, it's very rare when there's a situation where you couldn't do much about it. That's very true. But they exist. You know, they exist. And in that case, that's what I meant. Like, in those cases, if you really couldn't do anything about it, but it's very rare because sometimes it comes down to the scheduling, like Dimitri said. If you didn't schedule it and it was like go to the doctor today and you forgot to schedule it, that was a bit on you.
Definitely, definitely. Because I mean, I know people that always try to blame things on others. Oh, this happened, this happened, this happened. If your life is all controlled by outside things, what you're living for, like,
Mm,
your life's not gonna get better if everything you do is controlled by somebody else. So,
yeah,
okay, man, we're at
yeah.
38 minutes. I think that's a good time. Now, we've or again, it was Yassin's idea. I have to give him credit for that.
Thank you,
I
man.
just said, I just said yes, it's a good idea. Let's do it. He said we should include 3 things we're grateful for at the end of every podcast. So yeah, I'll start with uh, with the 3 mine. So I'm very grateful for the country I grew up in, which is Switzerland. As I said at the beginning of the podcast, we have wonderful opportunities here, and it's one of the freest and most democratic countries there is. And I like the culture as well. And then I am very grateful for the freedom I have by being an entrepreneur, the freedom that comes with it, even if I have to work more. I am very grateful for it. And then lastly, I'm very grateful to have a great family that is always here for me and that I can also spend time with and have good conversations with.
All right. these are very good, man. I good one. I'm also grateful for family. Um, we had our ups and downs, but especially during this period where I had these health issues, I really got to see they were there for me, and I'm really grateful for them. I'm also grateful for the fact that I'm from, I live in Switzerland, and I'm also from Egypt. I'm grateful I have this combination, and they both played a big part of who I am in my life. And, you know, I'm grateful to God for the fact that my mindset is the way it is, and that no matter what happens in life, He blessed me with that mindset of always get back up, always keep going. There's always hope, and I know many people don't have that. And final thing I'm grateful for is those of you that liked and subscribed. I'm just kidding.
Oh, he'll always find a way to put that in. If it weren't for you, man, last podcast I would have completely forgot about the call to action. But yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I am obviously also very grateful for every one of you that watches,
Yeah.
likes, subscribes to the channel, and that helps us grow along the way.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And
thank
let
you.
us know in the comments down below what are three things you're grateful for as well.
It's
Let's make
very
it a habit.
it's a very good exercise to recognize in what great situation you are. But yeah,
Yeah.
thank you very much
Thank
to
you.
all for commenting. And yeah, that's it from my side.
Me too.